Hello, welcome to another video on Inkscape. In this video I'm going to take a look at how we can create a vector graphic image like this. So before we get started, I'm just going to open up the dialog boxes that I'm likely to use. So I'm going to want to be using the fill and stroke dialog box. So we can come up to the top here and click on our fill and stroke dialog box button. I'm also going to want to use our layers and objects dialog box. So I'm going to click on that one too. And finally, I'm going to be using Trace Bitmap. So if we come over to Path and down to Trace Bitmap, that'll open up our third tab. So first thing I'm going to need to do is import my reference image. So I'm going to come up to File, down to Import, and in here I've already downloaded an image of a cat. So we'll double click on that to open it. I'm going to OK to the settings. And that's imported the image of our cat. At the moment it's a little bit too big for my page, so I'm just going to shrink it down. So I want it to scale around the center, so I'm going to hold down Shift, and I want to constrain the proportions, so I'm going to hold down Control, and then we can just drag on one of the little arrow handles and we can shrink it down to the size we want. I think that looks good. So the next thing I want to do is I just want to straighten up the eyes. So when we create our image, the eyes look level. So to do this, I'm going to drag in a guide from the top and just position it just above my eyes. To drag in guides, you need to have your rules visible, so your rulers around the edge. If you don't have this ruler around the edge, the way to get it visible is to come up to View, down to Show Hide, and in here we've got a selection of different things that we can toggle on and off. So now we've got our guide in place, we can click a second time on our image to get our rotation handles, and then we can just rotate it until the eyes look level with my guideline. So I think about there will do me. Now I've finished with the guideline, I can get rid of that, so I'll just drag it back off the top. So the next thing I want to do is just adjust some of the colours. I want to bleach out some of this fur. To do that, making sure that my image is selected, I'm going to come up to Filters, down to Colour, and then down to Brilliance. In here we can click on Live Preview, so we can see what's going on as we do it. We can see that it's already bleached out some of the fur. So if you just click in here, you can press 0 and it'll take it back down to 1, which is the minimum amount we can have in brightness. And we can do this with all of them. So 0. So this is our original image, and then we can just increase the amounts of brightness, saturation or lightness as we want, and we can see the changes in real time. So I think about there, I like that. So I'm going to press Apply. We can now get rid of the Brilliance dialog box. So the next thing I want to do is I want to mask out some of our image. So we've got just the parts of the image that I want to turn into a vector graphic. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to create a mask using our ellipse tool. So if we click on our ellipse tool, we can come over and we can drag out some ellipses to create our mask. I'm going to change the fill colour. At the moment there is no fill colour, so I'm just going to come down to the bottom. I think I'll make it just a light blue colour, and if we come over to the side, I'm going to hold down Shift and I'm going to click on the X to get rid of the stroke. Now, because we want to see what we're doing, I'm going to reduce the opacity of this. So if we come up to our fill and stroke dialog box, we can come down and I'm going to reduce the opacity down to about 50%, so I'll just click in the middle. Now, I'm going to get my selection tool, and then we can just move this about and position it how we want. I'm going to use blurring to smooth off the edges. So we need to make sure we stay a little bit away from the edge of our image. When we use blur, it expands the image slightly. And if we get too close to the edges, we may see some of these sharp edges of the image visible when we mask our image. So the next thing I want to do is I just want to make sure that I've got these eyes in. Obviously the eyes are quite an important part of our image. So I'm going to come up, grab another ellipse, and we can just drag an ellipse over the eyes. Let's widen it up a bit. I'll get my selection tool and then we can just move that up into position. I think I'm pretty happy with the rest. So now I want to union these two together so they're one solid shape. So we've already got this ellipse selected, so if we hold down Shift we can select our second ellipse, and we can come up to Path and down to Union to join them together. So as I said, I'm going to use blur to soften the edge of this shape. So if we come down, and we can just adjust the blur in our fill and stroke dialog box until we're happy with the results. Like I say, we don't want to blur it too far so it starts coming outside of our photo, otherwise we get sharp edges appear. So next thing I want to do is increase the opacity. When we use a shape with a softened edge to create a mask, we want the opacity to be 100%, so we need to make sure that our alpha channel is also 100%, and we want the colour to be white. So I'm just going to drag my lightness down until we're completely white. Now if we hold down Shift, we can select the image underneath, and then we can come up to Object and down to Mask, Set Mask. And that'll cut out our image for us. So as I mentioned before, if our blurring goes too close to the edge of the image, we can see a sharp line at the top here. So we need to adjust this. So we need to backstep, so we can press Ctrl Z to backstep and undo our mask. Click off to deselect. We're going to click back onto our mask shape, and I might just reduce the blur slightly just to bring the top of that image down, and I'm also just going to drag it down on the arrow a little bit. So now we should be well and truly inside our image. So we can apply the mask again. So we hold down Shift, select the image below, and then we can come up to Object, down to Mask, and over to Set Mask. And that looks better. We no longer have a sharp cut edge at the top here. So now we've got the image that we want to use to create a vector graphic. If we go to our Trace Bitmap dialog box, you'll notice down here in the preview window that it's still looking at the whole of the original image. The eyes aren't straight and we can see all of the image around. Now this is because when we use Trace Bitmap, it always looks at the original image. So to get around this, we need to create a new image. And to do that, I'm going to come over with our image selected. I'm going to come up to Edit and down to Make Bitmap Copy. I'm going to do a second step in a minute, but I just want to quickly show you something. Making a bitmap copy, we drag it off to the side, we click off, and again we've got sharp edges. So when we use Make Bitmap Copy, it copies the image to the edge of the bounding box. When we blur, the image extends outside the bounding box. So what happens is we get this clipping effect on the edges, which we don't want. Press Ctrl Z to go back, Ctrl Z to get rid of it again. We need to put a bit of white background on the back of this. So to stop that clipping from happening, what I'm going to do is come over, grab our rectangle tool, and I'm just going to put a rectangle behind our image. So I'll drag down, create a rectangle. I want it to match the background, so I want it to be white. So I'm just going to come down to the bottom here, and I'm going to use my left mouse button, click on the white, and that's going to give us a white rectangle. Now we want this behind everything, so if we come up to our selection tool, we want to drop it to the bottom. So we're going to use this button here, and that drops it behind our image. So now if we hold down Shift, we can select our cat image as well. So we've got both of these selected, and then we can come up to Edit and down to Make Bitmap Copy. Now this time, if we move our copy off to the side, we can see that we've got a white background and we haven't got any of the clipping of the image occurring. So I'm happy with that, so I'm press Ctrl Z to pop it back where it was. So now we've got our new image. We can see down here in the preview window that what we're creating a vector copy of is the image that we want to replicate. So to create our vector graphic of a cat, I'm going to make 3 different images and layer them on top of each other. Because when we use Trace Bitmap, it picks colours that best represent the whole of the image. Now this means we end up with muted colours. So what we're going to do is create 3 separate images. So we're going to concentrate on the eyes for one image. I'm going to concentrate on the fur for the second image, and the third image I'm going to concentrate on the tongue so we can get more vibrant colours. So I need to make clipping masks for the tongue and the eyes. So to do that, I'm going to come over and grab our Bezier tool, I'm going to zoom in a little bit, so I'm going to hold down Control. I'm just going to roll my mouse wheel to zoom in a touch. So I'm going to cut out the eyes first. So I'm just going to click up here. Now I'm going to click and drag to make a smooth curve, and we can just work our way around the eye. So click and drag to make a smooth curve, click and drag, and then we can click on to our original spot to finish that one. Then we can do the same over here. So we can click and drag to create a smooth curve, click and drag, and we can do this right around our eyeball until we've got our second shape. We want to union these two together. So I'm going to come up and grab my selection tool. I'm going to hold down Shift. I'm going to select the other shape. I'm going to come up to Path, and I'm going to come down to Union to join them together. I'm going to change the colour of these so we can see them a bit easier. And then if we come up to our Fill and Stroke dialog box, we can reduce the opacity down so we can check that we're just happy with the shape of our eye masks. So this one does look a little bit peculiar. So if we come up to our Nodes tool, we can come in and we can adjust the shape of our masks. So we can drag on the nodes, we can extend the handles to change the shape. We can actually drag on the line as well. So let's twist that round a bit. So I'm a bit more happy with the shape. I'm going to increase the opacity back up. And if we go to our Layers and Objects dialog box, we can see in here we've got a path 33. We can double click on this. This is our eyes. So we can put eye mask, click off. So that's the mask for the eyes. So next we want to do the same with the tongue. So I'm going to come over, get my Bezier tool, and then I'm just going to work my way around the tongue. So each time I'm clicking and dragging to create a smooth curve. If we wanted to make a sharp corner and we just wanted to drag that out to get the right shape, we can hold down Shift without letting go of our mouse button, and then we can move this second handle to the right position and then let go. So I'm going to do a similar thing here. I'm going to click and drag to get the curve that I want, and then I'm going to hold down Shift so I can realign this second handle, and then when I'm happy I can release the mouse button and take my finger off the shift, of course. And there's our second shape. So again, we can just have a look to see if we like this. So if we go back to our selection tool, we come up to our Fill and Stroke dialog box, we click in the middle of the opacity to reduce the opacity, and I might just adjust some. I'm going to reduce the colour down a bit more, the opacity down a bit more. I'm going to grab my Nodes tool, and I might just lift this corner up here, and then we can just move that in to wherever we want it. And I'm just going to lift these top ones up. I want to make sure that I get the colour at the top. I think that looks good, so we can increase the opacity up to 100%. Our alpha channel's at 100%. We want it to be white, so I'm just going to drag that up. So that's our two masks. So we need to start creating our images now. So this time I'm going to click over onto the layers dialog so we can see what we're doing. This is our tongue mask. I'm going to grab my selection tool again. So on path 34, we're going to double click, and I'm just going to change that to tongue mask. Oh. So I think I'm going to start by making our image of the eyes. So to do that, we need to mask off our eyes. So if we select our mask, I want to hold down Shift, select the image behind, and I'm going to come up to Object. So this time I'm going to use Clip. Clip is very similar to Mask. The only difference is with Mask we can have softened edges. We can't do that with Clip. It's either clipped or it's not. So I'm going to come over and I'm going to set Clip. So now we should have a nice copy of the eyes, which is there. So I'm going to press Ctrl Z to pop them back where they were. So to create my vector graphic of the eyes, we need to hide the rest of it. So if we come up here, we can hide our tongue mask by clicking on the eyeball to toggle the visibility off, and we want to hide the images that are below as well. So go to the image 2, we can toggle that one off, and image 1, we can toggle that one off. And as we can see, our image has disappeared. There we go, image 2 was the eyes, that's why. So we've got our image of the eyes. Now we need to make a vector copy. So if we come to Trace Bitmap, so if we look down at our preview window, we can see we've still got the whole of our image. So we need to make a copy again. So if we come up to Edit, we can come down to Make Bitmap Copy. A thing I forgot to mention earlier is when we use make bitmap copy, it makes a copy of our image, but it makes it to a set resolution. So the default resolution for make bitmap copy is 96 dpi, dots per inch. So if you download an image from Pixabay, same as I have, you'll get an image likely to be around about 300 dpi. So when we create a bitmap copy and it's only 96 dpi, you'll get a deterioration in the quality of the image. For what we're doing, it doesn't make much difference, but sometimes if you're zoomed right in on a high resolution photo and then you make a bitmap copy, you'll see a deterioration in the quality of your image. So the way we can correct this is just to change our settings. So if we come up to our preferences up the top here, spanner and screwdriver, we can either open it here, or if you don't have yours set out like this, another way we can do it is to come over to edit and down to preferences down the bottom. We want to come down to imported images right at the bottom here, click on that, and then in here we've got create resolution for create bitmap copy. So if you wanted yours to be 300 so you don't get any deterioration in the quality of your image, this is where you change it. So we just change that to 300 and that'll keep the quality of the image the same. We don't need to do that, so I'm going to get rid of that. Now we've copied the eyes, we can see down here we've got a nice copy of the eyeballs. So I'm going to click on remove background. What remove background does, it takes away the lowest scan. So in this case, the lowest scan is going to be the white. It's always the lightest colour. So if we click on remove background, that should remove the white background and we'd just be left with two nice eyeballs. We might lose the white in the reflections here, but we can live with that. Some of the other bits on here, scan is how many layers it makes, so how many scans it takes. So each colour that we see is a separate scan. So at the moment we've got 31 scans. That's quite a lot of scans. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reduce them down until we start seeing a significant deterioration in our image. Another thing we can do is if we drag this right over, we can see our image a little bit better once we've stretched it. So we can just sit here and reduce the number of scans until we start getting deterioration in our image, or a significant deterioration in our image. I think I'm going to settle for 16. Just to quickly run through some of the other things on here, we've got smooth. What smooth does is adds a little bit of Gaussian blur before it takes the scan. This just has the effect of smoothing out the paths. Remove background, like I said, takes away the lowest scan. So in our case, the lightest colour is white, so it's going to take away the white. Speckles just dictates what size spots we get in our vectorized image. You can make these bigger, so you have to minimize the amount of small spots. Smooth corners does exactly that, just has a tendency to round out corners. And optimize is a bit like simplify. It tries to minimize the amount of nodes and simplifies the image slightly. User assisted trace is just another way that we can specify an area to be traced. So, right, let's get on. So let's press apply and we have our vector copy. So now looking at our copy, it doesn't look quite as vibrant as the original. So to rectify this, with the vector copy selected, I'm going to come up to filters, down to colors, and then down to brilliance. And this opens up our box again, making sure that our values are set back to the minimums. So brightness is on 1, saturation's on 0, and lightness is on 0. We can click on our live preview. Now, as we change these, we better watch it change up here until we're happy with the results. So I'm going to add a little bit of saturation to brighten it up. I might reduce the saturation slightly, so I'm going to bring that down to 0.7. So I think I'm going to stick with that. I'm quite happy with that. So I'm going to press apply. We can now get rid of our brilliance dialog box, and we need to snap these back into position so we know they're in the right place. So to do that, I'm going to come over and I'm going to turn on my snapping on the right hand side. If you don't have your snapping set up like this and you want it set up like this, we can come into preferences and we want to come down to interface. We're going to click on the triangle in front. Down here we want toolbars, and at the bottom down here we've got a selection of different snapping control options. So we can have simple, we can have advanced, and we can have permanent. If we click on permanent, that gives us our permanent snapping bar down the right hand side, which is how I prefer it. So with snapping turned on, I've enabled snapping to bounding boxes. So now I should be able to just drag this up and snap it back into position. So if we go back to our layers and objects dialog box, we've got this G35. So I'm going to double click on that. So that's our vector of our eyes. So we can hide our bitmap copy of the eyes, and we're left with image 2, which was our clipped image. So we need to unclip this so we can get our original image back. So with image 2 selected, we're going to come up to object, and we're going to come down to clip and down to release clip. So that separates out our mask and our original image. Our eye mask we won't want visible anymore, so we can just hide that. Oh, I've hidden both of them. So if we click off for a second, image 2, we'll click back on the eyeball to make it visible. And I'll hold down control. I'm just going to roll my mouse wheel to zoom out a touch so we can see what we're doing. So the next thing we want to do is our tongue. So we need our tongue mask visible. So if we come up to our tongue mask, we can click visibility back on. I'm going to hold down shift. I'm going to select the tongue mask. So we've got the image and the tongue mask selected. And then we can come up to object and down to clip, set clip. And that chops out our tongue for us. So now we've got our tongue clipped. We need to make a copy. So we can come up to edit, down to make bitmap copy. Then we can come over to Trace Bitmap and we can make a copy of our tongue. So we got 16 colours. I don't know if any more. Actually, I quite like it like that. 17 colours. So I'm going to go with a 17. Press apply to make our vector copy. And there we have it. So we've got our vector copy here. We can come up to our layers and objects dialog box and group 57. If we double click on that, vector tongue, we can hide our vector tongue, we can hide our image 57, and we can go back to our image 2. Now we want to unclip this, so we're going to come up to object, down to clip, and over to release clip, which separates out our mask and our image. Our mask we can hide, we don't need that anymore, so we're going to click off to deselect. We can select our tongue mask and then we can just hide it. So now we're left with our main image. So this is what I want to make a copy of. So I'm going to click on it. I'm then going to come up to our Trace Bitmap. This time I don't want all the colours, I want it to be in black and white. So I'm going to come up to colours and I'm going to change that to greys. Now I'm going to drag this over so we get a nice big image so we can see what the quality looks like of our fur. We don't have to worry about the eyes or the tongue, but we can try reducing it down to minimise the amount of information that we need. I'm going to go with 13 scans. I think that makes quite a reasonable image. So I'm going to press apply and our preview's disappeared here and we can see we've got our image over on the left hand side. Let's move that back over a bit so we can see what we're doing. So if we go back to our objects and layers dialog box, this is our vector fur. So we should now have all the sections of our image that we want. So we can hide our image 2, vector fur we've got. So what I'm going to do is just move everything to the top, all our vector stuff to the top. So we want our fur moved up. I'm going to drop that underneath the vector eyes. And I'm also going to grab our vector tongue and move that up above the fur. So if we click on the image 35, I'm going to hold down shift. I'm going to select the masked image at the bottom, and that will select all the images in between. So what we can do now is just group all those together just to get them out of the way, tidy things up, and we can call that junk. So at the bottom we've got our white rectangle, we've then got our vector fur, we've then got our vector tongue and our vector eyes. Now at the moment our tongue and eyes aren't visible, so we can come over and toggle those on. And if we look at our image now, let's hold control and roll our mouse wheel, we can see that we've got this line around our tongue and around our eyes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select our eyes, and then I'm going to come up to filters, down to blurs, and then I'm going to come down to feather. Now what this does is keep our actual image in sharp focus, but it softens the edge. So we take that back down to 0. We can click on live preview so we can see what's happening, and then we just move that out of the way. Then we can increase the strength of our feathering until we're happy with the results. So what we want to do is kind of hide that sharp edge. So I think that looks pretty good. So now we can press apply, and we can do a similar thing to the tongue. We can get rid of our feather box. We hold on control, you can use our mouse wheel to scroll out, click off to deselect everything. If you wanted to, we could group all this together. And there we have our final image. I hope you found that useful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.